hello to everyone that's joined us on this lovely Friday afternoon. Um, okay, so my name's Hamida. I'm a psychologist and I've been in practice for about 10 years now. And today we're just going to talk about like women's mental health, right? So a lot of the time, like people ask, like, what is mental health and how is it relevant to all of us? And the thing is, like, mental health is something that relates to the psychological well-being of individuals and how well they're able to interact and function on a social level, an occupational level, and an individual level. We say a person doesn't have good mental health, we usually assume that there's mental illness involved, which means that there's a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder, or there's some issues with their mental capacity to deal with stress or the things around them and that influence them. So because it's Women's Month and we've just had Women's Day, we're going to be talking specifically about women's mental health, and I think it's a really good time to do that, especially because I think that the rest of the year usually is about men, and then we get 1 month to talk about us. So it's nice to focus on all of our issues and the things that affect us, and it's a lot. I think depression is one of the most commonly mental health problems that women experience, and women are more likely than men to experience depression and to get diagnosed and treated for depression. But there's a lot of other mental health conditions that affect women, and there's a lot of other different kinds of stresses that women experience and that women have to confront on a day-to-day basis, or even on a week-to-week basis. And a lot of it is kind of like sidelined, and there's not enough attention given to that. So I'm going to spend some time talking, and if anybody wants to add to it or ask any questions, I would really love that. But just to like, just to start it off and to get us going, some mental disorders, which are the biggest ones and which form a lot of what SADAC does, is depression and anxiety. Okay, so depression is usually a mood disorder. So that means that affects the person, how they feel about certain things. And depression is usually a low mood. So that's a lot of like helplessness, hopelessness, a lot of fatigue, feeling tired, feeling strained, feeling very down, not being able to do things, and not being interested in doing things as much as they used to. Anxiety disorders are usually things like PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, or acute stress syndrome, and it usually affects our thoughts and our mindset. And it's anxiety is something that happens where you feel like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen now. I don't know what's going to happen. So it's a different diagnosis from a mood, but you can have a mood disorder and an anxiety disorder at the same time. Now, when it comes to women, specifically depression and anxiety and other somatic symptoms are usually very much associated with women. And the difficulty we have in making the diagnosis with regards to women is that women have a lot of hormonal conditions and issues as well. So, for example, we go through PMS on a monthly basis. There's also perimenopause, there's menopause, there's postmenopause, and there's thyroid issues that women generally have a lot, which affect our mood and which affect our levels of anxiety as well. So we can be at risk for depression and anxiety much more than men and much more than children or teenagers as well. Although female teenagers and female children do have their own set of issues. So some of the like concurrent risk factors, we would say it's concurrent risk factors, like I said, is like the hormonal issues. So there's hormonal issues, right, that can affect us. So like sometimes when a woman is going through like a specific cycle of their period, they would be at more risk to feel very low and feel very down, or other women have a lot of anxiety symptoms at that time, which might make them be more prone to an anxiety disorder. But with mental health, though, we're not talking about the normal rhythms of living and the normal rhythms of having moods and anxiety issues, right? When you have a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder, it's something much more pervasive than just that. So a mood disorder would be diagnosed when you have a low mood or you're feeling really down and very low for an extended period of time. You have to persist for more than like 4 weeks, or more than like 2 to 4 weeks. It has to persist for over that period, and then we would classify that as a mood disorder. Okay, and anxiety disorders, we usually incorporate symptoms like racing thoughts, hypervigilance, feeling on edge all of the time, having irritable outbursts where you're feeling on edge all the time, something happens and you just like snap, you just become very snappy, or you become very hard towards other people. And that kind of makes you feel very, that's where we would kind of diagnose anxiety disorders, right? Does anybody, the other part of anxiety disorders, which I think women are more prone to, is PTSD, or acute stress syndrome. So acute stress syndrome is when people have the symptoms of like arousal. That means things easily trigger you, and you see something, it makes you feel really scared, it makes you feel really worried, you become very anxious about it, or not being able to sleep at night because you're constantly worried, you're constantly on edge about something. And then what happens is we have a lot of PTSD linked to sexual violence, right? And this is a female-based kind of issue that we have, is that a lot of sexual violence is perpetrated on women, and a vast majority of women experience sexual violence, and they react to that by developing mood disorder or an anxiety disorder. And that is a huge part of the diagnosis that women experience, right? In terms of their mental health, it suffers significantly because of sexual violence that's perpetrated on us. But we'll get to that as well. So, in terms of being a female and being a woman, one of the biggest triggers and stressors that women have, which lead to mood disorders or anxiety disorders and developing stress, is the multiple roles that we have to play as women, right? And when I say multiple roles, I mean it's like a lot of roles. If women have to be, in general, caretakers in their family. So as we daughters, we mothers, we wives, we are sisters, we are friends, we are companions, we girlfriends. We also, there's like widowers, and there's a whole variety of roles that we as females have to encompass and do, right? And the thing is, each role that we take on has a huge amount of demands that it places on us. So at any one particular time, you have to provide either emotional support or financial support or psychological support or mental support for the people around you. And because we as females are very social creatures, we find a lot of the time in my practice, I find that women feel very drained, or they feel like I can't cope because too many people want things from me. And the thing is, as natural caretakers, you want to give, and you want to be able to help the people around you, especially the people that are close to you, that are around you. So taking into account the different roles that we do have, I think the biggest thing, what I would like to focus on in this talk, is how do we manage the different demands that we have from our different roles, and how are we able to provide that kind of provide like support and be able to handle those different tasks on our own. Okay, so we have different roles, right? And in my practice, I use the analogy of a jug a lot of the time, and I talk about how we need to fill the jug that we are. So if you imagine yourself as a jug, right? A jug usually has a lot of water in it. And when you pour the water out towards different people, like let's just say you give a little bit to your family, you give a little bit to your work, you give a little bit to your kids, to your husband, to your neighbor, to your parents, to your friends. If you're giving a little bit of support or happiness or love or care or anything towards those people, we're usually emptying a lot of our stuff towards other people. But the problem lies when we develop when we develop mental health issues for women, is when we're not replenishing the resources that we're giving towards other people. So the first thing that women need to do, I feel, in order to prevent the onset of any kind of diagnosis, is to find ways to replenish the jug that they are, right? So that means trying to look introspectively and trying to find the time to look at what you need that will make you feel happier about yourself. So finding things that bring you joy, finding things that make you feel good about yourself, finding time alone, if there is time, if you are able to find time alone for yourself, that will help to replenish the resources you need in order to give other people. So sometimes what will happen is people with depression would tell me, I can't look. I don't have the energy to look after myself because I'm looking after everybody else. I don't have the energy to see to my kids or to my family because I'm feeling so drained a lot of the time. And if I'm feeling so drained to look after others, then how am I supposed to find the energy to look after me? Because people need me, and I can't give. I can't give to other people. How am I going to give just to myself? And this is where the analogy of the jar, of using the jar, comes in, because I feel, because what happens is you can't pour from an empty cup, right? I think a lot of psychologists use this analogy, and it's very well known. But it is well known because it's very true. You really can't pour from a cup that's empty because you won't be able to give anything. So I think one of the takeaways we could use from this is that in order to have good mental health and in order to have good psychological well-being, we need to first invest in ourselves first and to give to us first before we can give to others. And this can go a long way in helping to firstly notice when we're feeling down and notice when we're not feeling okay, or when our hormones are off, or when we're not feeling as good as we need to feel, so that we can replenish ourselves and then we're better able to and energized to be able to give to those around us. That's the one thing that I feel that I feel that everybody needs to kind of like take in and hone in on when it comes to that. Right. So other thing is like when it comes to like the different roles that we do have and that we do play, there's also with depression and anxiety. I also with depression and anxiety, women have if women are diagnosed, they're usually better able to seek help than men. So we will have a higher diagnosis of women who have been diagnosed with depression because naturally women are talkative. They like to seek help. They talk to their friends. They're social. They express concern about themselves, about their health. So socially, and even communities, it's much more acceptable for us to have issues and to talk about our mood issues or our anxiety problems. But we can talk about it, but often help is not, it's not, we're not as able or as easily able to get support for our issues. When I say this, I mean, sometimes it's very, if you've been diagnosed with depression, coming to therapy can be much harder for women than it is for men. This is because we have, like I said, a lot of demands impacting on us, but also we need to be able to make the time in order to get the help that we need. So if a mother of two has been diagnosed with postpartum depression and she needs to be able to get to see a doctor for psychiatric medication and to come and see a therapist to help her with her postpartum depression, sometimes it's very, very difficult for her to be able to access healthcare because of time constraints and because of the demands of childcare. So where does she leave her kids, or where does she find the time in order for somebody else to take care of her kids in order for her to come for therapy or to come for therapy or to come for her care? And when these kinds of things happen, it kind of prevents women from seeking help and also from getting the help that they need. Which is why with mental health, we need a lot of social support and we need a lot of support from other people in order to help us and in order for us to feel like we allowed in a way to get help. Because that's another thing that I find, like when it comes to our psychological, just female psychological health, is a lot of people feel they're not allowed to be depressed or they're not allowed to feel anxious. So they have to kind of take their whatever they're feeling and package it away and put it aside because there's no time for that, or there's no room for that in society or in the home in order to experience these things. So when I see a lot of females in my practice, they usually present when they're very much severe and when they're feeling really unwell because it's taken them so long and it's taken so many things to happen in order for them to come and seek help. So they come when things are really bad, and so we have to do a lot of crisis intervention. And crisis intervention is when the depression has gotten so bad that they're usually feeling suicidal, or they've taken to self-harm, or they're not able to meet their social functioning or their occupational functioning really, really low. So note again, if we're able to replenish our cup and notice when things are going down, we're able to seek help earlier, then we're not going to get symptoms that are that severe that will prevent treatment and recovery. Okay. So depression, anxiety, psychological distress, sexual violence, and domestic violence. some of the mental health disorders that affect women to a greater degree than they do men. And this is, like I said, is created by the multiple role, like pressures of multiple roles. Firstly, the second thing that creates a lot of pressure for women is gender discrimination, and this could be gender discrimination in the workplace as well as in the home, and in the home and in social settings. There's a different expectation for women, that women have, whether it's at home or in the workplace, right? At work, recently with the Me Too movement, there's been a huge outcry globally, especially in the US, about how much of sexual harassment women experience on a daily basis, from their superiors and from their male colleagues, which they've just had to put up with in order to be able to keep their job and to be able to be employed and then provide for their families. And the thing is that there's a lot of the time we've been, because there's not enough social support and even corporate support or HR support for if a female has to go and complain about a superior, she usually doesn't have any other outlet except to go to a superior to complain about him, and then what's going to happen there? And then usually they're very worried and they can become very, very anxious about the fallback from that. So sometimes patients develop anxiety disorders and stress disorders. They will get worried about going to work, or they get worried about whether or not they're going to be able to perform well at work, or because they feel like they're being discriminated or being sexually harassed by their colleagues or by their superiors. And then there's not much more. They feel very powerless and helpless, which can lead to feelings of depression and hopelessness, and which can affect that function. It kind of becomes like a little loop that you get stuck in. Something, you go to work and you're feeling really good about going to work, but then you get discriminated at because you're a woman, or because you're somebody that somebody likes, or they might mark at you, or they might touch you inappropriately, or say something inappropriately, or judge you for it. And they can have a really how you feel about yourself, how you think others see you. Because research shows women worry about how they look to themselves, how other people perceive their peers, and so you constantly worry, and these things really can really affect females. And then what happens is you get worried about what to do. You feel very hopeless, very helpless, and anxious about how you can get out of the situation. So gender discrimination affects women in the workplace quite a lot, and it leaves a lot of us feeling very anxious and very worried and scared and about how to approach this. The other area, and then in the home as well, there's a lot of gender discrimination, and I find that a lot with in couples and in couples relationship, there's gender discrimination because of gender-based roles. Traditionally, women were staying at home, and they stayed at home and they took care of the kids in the house, and men went out to work. But now times have changed now, where women have also been allowed into the workplace, and they've also worked very long jobs with very long hours, but they still have kids, they still have homes to run, they still have lots of responsibilities to do in the home. But a lot of the childcare responsibilities or the household responsibilities fall on women. It does not, men seem to not, they don't come to the party as much. And in a lot of the time, especially with the coronavirus epidemic, what's been happening globally, not just in our country, but a lot of women's careers have taken a fallback because men are going to work. They have the better jobs with the higher pay. So automatically, if there's one person that needs to stay at home, the woman often stays at home, or she works from home, and then she takes care of the kids, and she takes care of the house, and she takes care of the running of the errands and seeing to the homeschooling of the children. And then that becomes added stress and added pressures for her to be able to manage all of her multiple roles, but within the confines of the home. Whereas the man still gets to go to work and still gets to come home without having those kinds of pressures. And having these kinds of extra pressures puts us at risk, or puts women in general at risk, for depression, for anxiety, for stress, because they have to worry about a bunch of things without the added kind of like coping mechanism of being able to spread their time out, or their days out, or to be able to manage it, or to get help from like having a nanny to help care for the kids, or a helper to help with the cleaning of the house, which is what they would normally do. But now all of those coping mechanisms have been gone. So in the coronavirus epidemic, the pandemic across the world, there's been lots of articles online as well about how women have been more experiencing more depression, more anxiety, and more stress because of the added stress of having to function all of their roles within the confines of the home and not having enough support. So support from the ability to just take even though it is stressful to take kids to school, but having them be at school so you can work and do your work at home. Now it means you have to homeschool them and then school and then do your work at home. It's become really stressful, really chaotic for a lot of women, and they feel there's a lot of anxiety about whether or not they're performing their roles well, whether they feel being able to be there for their kids to the best of their ability, and also whether or not they're being able to be the best for their work as well. So there's a lot of gender discrimination at home. I'm not being bad to men in general. I think there's a lot of men who help their wives and who would have 50-50 kind of involvement in the home environment as well. But I'm just talking generally about what's been written about generally about what's going on. Okay. So I think so gender discrimination in the home and in the work. Also, like socially, that I think there's an expectation that women generally just do more for their families, for their parents, and for the people around them. So if somebody's sick, then it's generally somebody you would generally call on a female friend or daughter to come and help or to do things, and then that generally affects women more. And there's a lot of stress about that as well. In light of the coronavirus epidemic as well, because we were on lockdown and because we had to stay at home and we weren't allowed to travel, it's been in the papers too that there's been a rise in the reports of gender-based violence and the sexual violence that has been perpetrated against women by their partners, and that's a huge proportion of women who are supposed to feel safe at home but cannot feel safe at home. So usually they would be able to go to a friend's house or go to work to get away from their abusive partners. Now they're not able to do that. So gender-based violence is a whole section is a big trigger for mood and anxiety disorders, and also PTSD and anxiety for women that they experience as well. There's also a positive relationship between the frequency and the severity of all of these social factors which I've mentioned, and the frequency and severity of mental health problems. So that means that as we see, you can see like a gender incline. So as the social triggers increase, as the severity of it increases, there's like an automatic increase in mental health disorders as well. So there's a positive correlation between the amount of stress we have from our home environment and from the work environment and from our own pressures and the roles that we have related to mental health diagnosis and the mental health issues that we experience. So I'm going to break down a little bit more about some of the diagnoses that women experience in addition to the mood disorders and anxiety disorders. The one thing is sleep. Women generally sleep a lot less than men, especially if they have very young children because of breastfeeding or waking up at night. Children they usually turn towards their mothers and prefer their mother's company over their fathers. So there's a lot of, and research shows that women who sleep better, have better mood, are better functioning, are more able to multitask, are able to perform their roles and responsibilities better, and who are able to manage better. So sleeping and lack of sleep is definitely a criteria that we look into and ask all of our patients, because if you're not sleeping, it's automatically going to affect your mood and how you feel about yourself. So, and the thing is, the opportunity for sleep is sometimes very poor. So you have to make time to sleep. If you are a working mother and you are at home, usually you do your best work for your company when the kids are sleeping, but then that means that you're sleeping very little as well. So there's that to look into. In terms of social pressures, there's a lot of women are more likely to be diagnosed with an eating disorder. And when I talk about that, I mean like anorexia or bulimia and obesity. So what happens is, or binge eating. So there's a lot of social media influence or social media pressure on women that is more on women than on men, especially teenage girls. So looking at your Instagram feed or your Facebook feed and then comparing how other people's bodies look in comparison to yours and then wanting to change that, could mean that there's a lot of internal pressure, internal a kind of a trigger for yourself on how you feel about your body and how you feel about what you should look like versus what you do look like. So there's a lot more. It seems like women are more predisposed to having eating disorders because of the constant influence that they have from social media, and because social media and media in general usually perpetuate unrealistic body images for women to follow or to desire or to adhere to, and they're creating those unrealistic expectations impact on our expectations of ourselves and can lead to us wanting to control or restrict our eating or overeating and then uh, or overeating and then regressing it and then bringing it up again, which can lead to the diagnosis of eating disorders. Okay. The PTSD, there's lots of women are more likely to experience PTSD within the context of gender-based violence, like I've said before, but also because with PTSD, there's not a lot of like there's not as much information. Like we talked about mood disorders and anxiety disorders, but when people have PTSD, they usually assume it's going to go away after a while or it'll get better. But with gender-based violence and with the perpetual violence that happens, it's a trauma that happens repetitively and happens ongoingly all the time. So more than in order to kind of treat those diagnoses, we have to remove women out of the equation or out of the environment where the abuse is happening. And sometimes that's not easy to do, and it's very difficult, especially when there's kids involved. So there's usually a re-traumatizing thing that notice that happens where you get traumatized over and over and over again because of the violence that's been affected on you, and that can really eat away at your mental health. And in those cases, then professional help really needs to be sought, because the pouring from the empty cup here is not going to work because the cup is broken. Like there needs to be more severe kind of and more dire kind of attempts to achieve that. Okay. So with regards to eating disorders, I have to jump back again. With eating disorders, there's also lots of body image issues that women have about looking a certain way and feeling about their bodies. This is not just a strict body image issues. Is not about like it's not it's different from eating disorders because it's how your body it's a desire for how your body should look in a certain way, because in comparison to what you think it should look like. So you might have a person who looks normal, but what happens is they feel like they don't look normal, and so then they try to change it even though everybody else tells them that they're fine or that there's no issue. It's something that doesn't feel like, well, okay, I see that there's a question here. I'm just going to try and get it. Okay. Okay. Could we say that re-traumatization is the same or in the same frequency of being triggered? So a trigger is if you have a traumatizing incident that happens to you, okay, it's a trauma you've experienced and you've gone through it. Trigger is come across something that is trauma. So if by your partner and now you've removed yourself from the relationship, but then you see somebody that looks like your partner, or you're in a situation where you feel like you're getting abused by somebody again, then that could be a trigger. Re-traumatization happens when you've been involved in one kind of trauma, and then the same trauma happens again, or a trigger or something close to that happens to such an extent that it feels like the trauma, you re-experiencing the trauma in a way. So the trigger is something that could remind you of the trauma that you've experienced and then bring back all the memories, whereas re-traumatization kind of is like creating new memories of the same trauma, or creating new memories of a new trauma that's very, very closely related to the old trauma. I hope that answers your question, Zakia. All right. So I'm just going to finish, or I'm just going to summarize what we talked about already. And thank you so much for the person who asked the question. I think that's helped everyone to see, kind of like visualize what I was trying to say about the multiple roles and the stresses about what we were talking about. So I think like to summarize, like women are much more predisposed to mood disorders and anxiety disorders and trauma because of the different roles and the different kinds of things we're exposed to in terms of at work, in our homes, in our families, in terms of our own thinking, in terms of what we're exposed to on social media, in the workplace, and even in our lives in general. We're much more prone and we're much more liable and to develop mood disorders and anxiety disorders. And in order to prevent that, it is good for us to take care of ourselves and to replenish ourselves in order to be able to meet the demands around us and to notice when we're not feeling well so that we can reach out and get help. And in being able to reach out and get help, we make ourselves well enough again to do the things that we need to do, to meet our social demands, to meet our occupational responsibilities, to meet our personal responsibilities, and to be able to do our best for the people around us and for ourselves, because you feel good when you do things well. So again, I want to bring in the notion of the empty cup. You can't pour from an empty cup, which is something you will hear a lot everywhere. But hear from me, you can't pour from an empty cup. So make sure that you're always filling yourself up with love, with joy, and with peace in whichever way suits you, whether it's through prayer, through reading, through time out, time for yourself, time with your friends, time with your family, non-demanding time, quiet time. Make sure that you're always replenishing yourself. And remember that if we can take care of ourselves and take care of each other, I feel like women are social creatures and we can rely on each other and support each other and provide good structure for each other and good advice for each other. We can really, really help to build our immunity against mental illness and become better able to live more healthier, psychologically well lives and be less, and then maybe hopefully help rein in our diagnosis for mental illness. But if anybody's experiencing any kind of mental issues or psychological distress, mood symptoms or anxiety symptoms, there are lots of professional help out there, and there's lots of organizations like SADAG where you can reach out and get help so that you are not alone and you do not have to suffer on your own, and you do not have to suffer in silence, because there is a lot of help. And we're living in a time and age where help is readily available and more accessible and more available than it's ever been before. So if you need help, look into yourself, check to see if you do need help, and then take the courage and take the step to reach out and to get the help that you need. Because again, you can't pour from an empty cup. Thank you everyone for joining in on this meeting. I know it's Friday afternoon and everyone's wanting to relax, but thanks so much for coming online again. I hope you found this talk beneficial, and I hope that it helped at least somebody out there with whatever it is that was bothering them, and you've got some advice about what to do. If you have any questions to ask me directly, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram and send me a DM or send me an email or go to my website. It's hbs.psychologist. No, my website is durbanpsychologist.co.za. hbs.psychologist@gmail.com is my email if you want to reach me directly, or you can just call Lynn at SADAG and she'll be able to get you in touch with me. But thank you so much to everyone for joining in. I wish you all a blessed weekend and good luck and take care. Thanks.